Hello, and welcome to Morgan Latif Presents Leadership in Action. I'm your host, Sam Latif, and this week my guest is Alexander Baumgartner. Alexander has been Group CEO of a large flexible packaging business, as well as holding a number of leadership roles across the industry for over 25 years. He now holds the President Europe role for ProAmpac and is a board member for Goglio. This week, we talk about his insights on leadership, ranging from how to spot the best leaders. Are they born or are they made? How do you deal with large turbulent macroeconomic factors when it comes to leading large business units through those turbulent times? And also, what are the lessons he gives to those aspiring leaders to best encounter them for the future? This is a conversation for any level of experience that is looking to extract value on how to become and identify great leaders in today's working world.
Right. So thanks for joining me, Alexander.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. No problem at all. And look, I wanted to start right at the beginning, right? So in our Leadership in Action podcast, obviously speaking to a number of leaders from different backgrounds, but I really wanted to understand from your side, what were the early influences that sort of really impacted you in your early life and made you want to be a leader?
Well, that's a good question and needs some reflection because many things in life just happen as they happen, and I wasn't born, and from day one I could remember I said to myself or to my friends or to my parents, I want to be a leader. I want to be a leader. That was definitely not the case. It just developed, and probably. There were a couple of things which influenced the fact that at the end of the day, I became a leader for bigger, smaller, and bigger organizations over time. One is that I grew up in an environment. I'm Austrian, but I grew up in Italy. Went to school in Italy. Went to school in international school. So it was an environment where many things kept changing because in international school it's like a classic that people come and go because depends on their parents' assignments. They might be living for a period of time in a country and then they move on. So there were a lot of moving targets around me where you needed to reconnect and rebuild friendships and rebuild social contacts over and over again. And I think that impacted me because you cannot really take anything for granted because it might be different the next morning, or in this case of school, like September, school starts again, and I don't know, 1/3 of the class is no longer there, and there are new people sitting next to you, and you need to reconnect and those kind of things. This is one, and another part is probably parents. I would say I was lucky that I had parents who always motivated me to not take things for granted, just challenge and just ask questions, and they were never bored of me as a child asking questions. And I think that has an impact for life. And if I can give a small advice to people who have kids, you should do the same. And so this is the second piece. And the third piece, when you start, it starts at when you college, university. You have friends and people say, oh, we need to do this and this, and who will organize this? Alex, you should. So you have people referring to you, accepting you, taking ownership and leadership on simple things in life. Yeah? And this, like, why are always people pointing at me? And then you start and I was okay with that. I never had a problem with that, to be honest. I know that some people say, oh, why it's always me? Somebody else should do it. And I said, fine, I do it. It works. And same in the business environment. When I started my career very early, I was like given tasks which were not given to everybody, and I was happy. And obviously, by delivering results to those tasks, then you grow. You grow. The more you can, the more you learn, the more experience you have. You grow with with your day-to-day activity and your way of thinking and your way of learning to lead people and all of those things you learn over time. So these were probably the main task. Definitely what I don't think that's maybe I'm going maybe on a tangent, but that's really a strong belief I have. There are people who are not gifted in becoming a leader. There might be great experts. They might be really great in what they do, in their field, in their activity, but they're just not gifted. And you can send those people, and there's nothing wrong with that. We need those people
absolutely.
too, right?
Yeah,
I'm not saying
absolutely.
it for good or bad or black and white. It's just a fact. And if a small piece of advice, don't even send those people to trainings, to whatever. It's not going to happen. They have different skills and they will never be happy to be leaders because it's just not in their DNA. It's just not given, and it's fine. And you should never push those people in leadership positions because they will never perform what they expect, and the people will not be happy. Right. So no, I closed the tangent.
And I think it's interesting how you're in your early life, it felt like you were kind of almost thrust in that position, or you were naturally inclined to already be a leader. And there's always that debate in terms of nature versus nurture when it comes to leadership. Are you then, because again, those decisions are kind of out of your control, really, in terms of which school you go to. Your parents obviously, obviously we're developing those skills, those attributes in you. Would you then fall in that camp in terms of leaders are born rather than made? Is there a mix of two? How do you see that in particular?
In those setups as we're having here now in podcasts, you tend to be a little bit black and white in order to send the message. And this is what I did. And obviously there's a big share of the population which is in the gray zone, right?
Yeah.
And where definitely training and helping, somebody else taking their hands and pulling them into a certain direction, showing them the do's and don'ts, help. And people are developing, and there are a lot of people who are open-minded and want to grow. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're in one extreme, which is that's not my thing, don't even try. There might be the other extreme where people are like natural, fine, great, but there's a big chunk of people in the middle which obviously needs hand-holding and needs support and training. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And you've also had different types of leadership roles, obviously all the way up to CEOs, leading business units, and then obviously making your career. How did you identify the leaders in that respect? Because as you said, you probably also at some point had people that were fairly early in their careers, and even later in their careers, sometimes people do get put into management positions that aren't necessarily best suited to those. How did you fine-tune your ability to spot the best leaders?
Well, I have maybe 4 general rules when it comes to what is the right setup, or who are the right people for a job. And it starts with the CEO, by the way, and goes all the way down. Let me try to explain those. One is be the right person for the time. Now you have, let me create an example. You need to fill a position which became vacant for a business unit leader. The first thing you need to think is, what does the business unit need? Is it a technology a time where there's a technology change out there? Is the market changing? Is it a financial restructuring because cost control is key in that division going forward? Is it innovation because new products are? You will need a leader that ticks those boxes. The best leader innovation might by definition, by the way, is not the best cost control leader.
Yeah.
So you need to ask yourself, what is the best, let me say, capability needed for that particular job. When we're talking leader, we're not talking head of R&D or whatever, where there's a specialist. We're talking generalist leader, which is a CEO, which is a divisional leader, or a country manager, or those type of things. So think about what is needed, right? Then the next thing is that person capable? There are so many people, especially in big organizations, who just do, in these days, like you have 200-300 emails a day. You have, I don't know, 80% of your time loaded with Teams and Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
Then you travel a little bit and your day is full. But you need people who still manage that, but still have the time and the energy to think about what is needed for the business. Why do we want to get to? So what I would call, maybe create a vision. It may be a big word, but I mean, setting the direction. Does not necessarily need to be a vision to begin with, but setting the direction. The third thing, which I think is super important, is and this was a point which I was always very attentive in hiring people in certain function, is that individual able to create followers? Because the more generalist you are, the more general management function you are not the expert of everything you do with everything in your plate. You need to rely on people around you, trust. You say, I said before, getting the direction, people need to understand and they run. You cannot keep controlling those people. And people need to like working for you and to like working for your direction, for your vision. And people are better in transmitting this than others. And you can be the greatest brain on earth. If you're the only one in the room who gets it, you're not going to be successful. Yeah. You need people who align with you and follow you and who are happy to work with you, right? And the last thing is just lucky. Just sometimes I ticked all the boxes and I was unlucky, or the individual was unlucky because something really happened which was beyond anybody's control, or either in favor or against us. And there's just nothing you can do. Yeah, you can anticipate and all of that. Let's take that aside for a moment. But sometimes it just got to be lucky, right? So now back to your question. This is a package which I usually use when picking people, assessing people for leadership roles. And then, of course, the bigger the role, the more important become those elements. The smaller the role, the more you maybe can compromise because things are different. Having said that, it also means, which I had to learn the hard way, to be honest. You know, we people, you make a decision. Now you have John taking the leadership of this division. And 5 years later, because you're just getting used to John, you work so well together, and things keep going. But if the environment changes, back to my first point, if the environment changes, you might need to change John, right? Yeah. Because he's not the right person to lead that business anymore, because you need different capabilities and John does not have it. And that's really the challenging dynamics in being in senior leadership position, that you continuously assess.
Yeah.
Final sentence, and then I pause. And I think generally people like to work for people they respect and they follow, but at the end of the day, they want to be successful. And I've seen people working for assholes, sorry my French, but they were super successful, and they were happy because they came home at the evening and I said, you know what? My boss, I don't like him, but you know what? We did this, we win that customer, we win that product, we launched it, and it's something they're proud of, yeah? So at the end of the day, they want to be successful. People want to be successful because success guarantees their pay, guarantees their job, and guarantees the comfort of their family. And that's like the combination you need to set in order to identify successful leader and to be a successful leader yourself.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of really interesting points there. And look, I think nobody's obviously gotten the silver bullet on how do you have 100% success rate on choosing the right leader, or else that person or that firm would, obviously be flying. But I think going back to, I said, a few of the points you mentioned and unpacking a few of the things there. You said the person has to like you. That authentic leadership aspect is quite an important one, because I think when you're managing so many people, you also have to navigate relationships with so many different people, and you can't please everyone all the time.
Correct.
You can't be everything to everyone, right? You can just sort of be yourself. And you said you've had some harsh lessons on the way in your leadership path. I was just curious again, because we've met a few times, and you always seem to be somebody who's authentically yourself, and I think that would certainly translate into how you communicate, how you've been a leader. How did you learn to do that well? Like, who were your influences, I suppose, that enabled you to sort of be comfortable as a leader and bringing yourself to work? And how did you navigate that, managing so many people in large organizations?
I think there is one important step in life, and I keep saying that to my kids, and my son, who started his working career already implemented my advice. For your first job, pick the boss and not necessarily the pay, the company, the location. Pick the boss you really believe, which obviously is an assessment. You're 22, 24, 25 years old. It's not an easy one. But it needs to be somebody who is prepared to take your hand into this world, in this working environment world, gives you challenges, and you really respect as I can learn from him. Like, don't pick a boss where already in the interview you feel like I am already know more or superior to him. Take somebody you look up. Take somebody you really can learn from, and be open. Walk in day one and actually keep learning, keep letting him and the environment influence you in your doing. And I have seen that many times. I've seen so many people taking, actually now more kids or friends or those type of things, just picking a first job because it's a good pay.
Yeah.
Right? 5 years later, 7 years later, they didn't develop. They still are in the same job. Others who did a different route, 5 years later, are earning more, are in bigger jobs. Yeah, they started different. I'm not saying half of the pay, but usually differences aren't that big.
Yeah.
But back to your question, Sam, the first person you work for has a huge impact on how your career path and your leadership skills develop. I'm convinced with that, because you're fresh from university, from your studies, your brain is open. And once you are into a logic, then it's difficult to, that's just human nature. Once you think you have learned something, it's different to change.
Yeah. So then who influenced you the most? Was it a case that was that first job? Because I sometimes also think that it can also be a first job, but in my sense, it was actually more my second job and my third job, where, I mean, in those first kind of 10 years, you probably have a chance to experiment a little bit more in terms of like looking at different industries or different types of companies. And so would you say that was the case with you, or was it really straight from the first job that really set you on your path?
It was the case with me. I got lucky. Nobody gave me that advice. It's just on the hindsight that I'm retroactively now analyze what happened and how things happen. And that's the advice I give to the younger generation. But that was my case. But I agree with you, Sam. If you find out in your first job that's not the right thing, just move on. Don't stay there for 60 years.
Yeah.
Move on after 3 months, right? Or 6, and look for something more challenging, more important for your own development. Yeah. But ideally, it is. In my case, it was a first job. Yes, it was.
Yeah. You also talked about some of the harsh lessons, and I think you know, especially in the world that we live in now, social media tends to glamorize a lot of the things. I mean, even LinkedIn starts to feel like the Instagram of the professional world, where every company is going through hyper growth and everybody's having record-breaking quarters and promotions, etc. And I think people actually, again, they don't realize the kind of the iceberg of hard work and sacrifice and failures. And I think that's also something we wanted to sort of shine a light, even somebody yourself that, you know, has reached the CEO role, which I think I read a statistic is like a 1 in 100,000 chance for people that go into the corporate world. It's very, very, you know, to get that top job anywhere in any industry is tough. So we'll talk a little bit about how that came to be, but I was curious to understand what were some of the key kind of failures or learnings you took from your career that really, I said that you took most from, you know, what were the failures that you think that really helped navigate, that really changed the path for you, and kind of what were the things that most impacted you, I suppose, in that respect?
The two things which crosses my mind on that. One is people I kept holding them and giving them not only a second chance but a third and the fourth chance, and where my brain already told me it's not gonna work, it's not gonna happen, this individual is not gonna deliver or perform the way you expect him or her to do. And in my early days in my career, I was way too patient in saying, okay, let's sit down, let's talk. Here are my expectations. You gotta change. And I'm still a fan of doing that once, because I've had so many cases where people said to me, never ever anybody told me that, right? So I'm glad you told me, and people change. I have that as well, which is the beauty of a career where you see people developing, because you just, as simple as that, talked to them, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes, and I had more than one in my career, people just don't get it, are the wrong people for the job, and they are not motivated to change, and I made mistakes in holding them instead of just turn the page, move on, let them go, replace them with somebody else. I made mistakes there. Will never happen again. I'm a little bit too old to do it again so many times, but I'm way more strict when I do assessments today than in my early days in my career. Yeah. The second is, in every job you have like babies you like. It might be a product, might be a customer, might be a country, might be whatever organization you're in, or even worse, a new development. Like here is an innovation, here's something new we bring to market, and you are like the owner, the facilitator to help to bring it to market easily and quickly. And brains create failures. Sometimes you just think things are gonna fly, your idea is gonna fly, and it isn't. And then what you do is, instead of, if you're too into something and emotionally into a project, let me call it like that, you tend to hold on for too long and keep investing time and money and say, yeah, let's try this, and let's paint it green, or let's shape it round, and maybe the market will then react. No. No. Still the same product, right? But you keep believing in it, and then 5 years later say, why the hell did I not not let it go after 1 year.
Yeah.
It was so obvious back then already. Nothing changed. Literally nothing changed. Yeah. And that's difficult. That's really difficult because especially for an individual like myself, where I'm always very passionate in what I'm doing, it is difficult sometimes to just get the distance and say, wait a minute, what am I doing here? I believed in it. This is the market reaction. This is the price level, whatever is not going to fly. Okay, maybe there are anybody in the room who has another idea? No, turn the page, new one. I'm way more strict today than I was at the beginning of my career.
Yeah. And is there almost like a mental model you use to now make those decisions? Because I can imagine that being difficult, because sometimes when you hear about a lot of these trailblazers and pioneers in business, you hear about how invested they were in their own idea, and how despite everything that was being told to them about not listening to critics or that the market or the customer feedback is saying, that they held on to their belief and eventually they proved successful, right? Those are the sometimes the stories that also you hear about these very successful CEOs or entrepreneurs. So how do you also make that distinction between, I know I have the right idea that is going to change or really be a game changer for us, versus the ones that are like, I'm just, flogging a dead horse here, really?
I don't think you can. I don't have a solution for that. And I think the easy answer to that is, if you are an entrepreneur, you can do that because it's your money, it's your risk. Okay, it's about your dividend at the end of the year. There will no dividend, but you keep believing in your idea. Fine.
Yeah.
But if you are an employed manager, including a CEO, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Because your shareholder, your stakeholder, your shareholders especially expect returns, and expect returns every year. And that's just for me, what you just described, and we all know examples. We all have read books. We all have heard them. Yes. And there are out there. And I hope that these guys continue to be out there.
Yeah.
But they meant to be entrepreneurs. And it's fine. They should believe in their idea and they keep going. But and that's the difference. As a CEO, you are partially an entrepreneur, but that's the element which you don't have, because you don't put your own money at risk.
Yeah.
It's somebody else's money. And you need to respect that. And therefore, it does not allow you to make many of those mistakes, because otherwise you're not successful.
Yeah.
That's the difference between a corporate world and being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And you've seen it and done it. And I think you talked about luck. And as I said, we speak to senior leaders a lot of the time. And, obviously a lot of people have ambition to sort of have that top job. And I was also curious to understand, because I know you talk about it, I think it is luck. I said, we talked about the percentage of actually getting to that position. But were you always deliberate in going after the top job eventually? Or is that just something that just came out of just natural progression and you just took opportunities? Like what was your journey to eventually get there?
It was the latter.
Right.
The latter. I very early in my career, I got jobs with big responsibilities. I was the managing director of a family-owned company with 1,200 people. There were two MDs, co-MDs, so nobody was a CEO, but they were co-MDs when I was 34 years old. And which I consider, for now the younger generation, it's like, oh my God, 34, it's already late in the game. In my generation, it was early in the game.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh my God, I'm lucky to get there, and I try to deliver. I really always try to do what I did very well and to best of my energies and capabilities. And I never was like, oh, now I'm 34, I got this job. At 38, I need to be there. At 42, I need to be there. I never was that kind of person. And some even say it's a mistake because I should have been a little bit more like that. But okay, you are what you are, and you said it at the very beginning, Sam. I'm very happy to hear that from you, especially that I seem to be a very authentic person, and this is part of my authenticity. um, I just try to do my things well, and then people see you acting, and I always got, the CEO job I got by changing through a headhunter. Yeah, I was not promoted internally, but I was like the external guy joining the company. But I was in the space, I was in the industry, so I was already close to the industry, very close.
Yeah.
But it's difficult. It's one of those where you need determination. You need to be open for it. And I see many people, and that's a little bit of thing between man and female. Women tend to say, "Oh no, it's too big of a job, too big of a responsibility." Male tend to say, "Bring it on." Yeah. So that's kind of, if I may paraphrase, the difference. And I was definitely the guy type of person who said, "Okay, a headhunter calls me for a CEO job. Sure, let's listen. Let's bring it on. I'm sure I'm ready for that." So I never had doubts, but I was not planning my career like, "Oh my God, now I'm 50, I gotta be there," or "I'm 45, I need to be at that level," or no, I never had that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny. I said I think a lot of most people that I think have entered that job, or certainly that I've come across, have never been that deliberate. They just, as you said, were very passionate about the job they were in before, and people saw that and they delivered results. And then ultimately, and I'm sure obviously there are examples of people being very astute in how they plan their careers, but I think
Mm.
more often than not, I said the chances of things are quite low. So I think just focusing the task at hand. Obviously, you need to think a few moves ahead as well, but it's interesting that I said most CEOs that I've spoken to probably have the same, or were not as deliberate or purposeful, I would say, with sort of saying, yeah, kind of when they started their career, I want to be the CEO of the company, which I always thought is uh, an interesting mindset to have for the people that
Sure.
eventually get those roles. Looking at it, I'd be remiss also to not ask you a little bit more about, or at least touch a little bit about the packaging industry, given the vantage point that you've had in it, and as a CEO, and also the track record you had, and also the network that we have in the industry. And I was curious because now, we certainly observe the industry there's a lot more talent coming into the industry. There's a lot more attention being paid to the industry in general, given the sustainability topics as well. And again, as you, particularly in the courses of your career, I just was interested to see how you saw the industry evolve a little bit about, still with the board positions that you have, how do you see it changing? What are some of the things that you see it being, what are the kind of the industry things that you're kind of looking to? What are the trends that you're looking to over the next few years that you think will be important for leaders in the industry in particular to pay attention to?
But I think there are a couple of trends that I saw and was part of. One, definitely in the last 20 plus year, is consolidation. So the industry was, if you look back, not that long, actually, 20 years. What is 20 years? It's not that long after all. The amount of companies, the size of the amount of companies was really high. Every folding cartons, corrugated, glass a little bit lower because of the furnaces, a little bit more capex intensive. But even plastic, converting, flexible, rigid, whatever. A lot of companies, a lot of family-owned companies, predominantly family-owned companies, smaller entities, 1 or 2 sites, delivering usually one customer or two. You usually had an anchor customer, and did a nice job. So the owner was involved, and that was the industry. since we have seen big companies growing, global companies managed in a completely different way, enriching and enlarging product portfolios. So the industry in that respect changed a lot from being like a little bit bigger than a garage type of setup to a real corporate, well-managed and organized, structured industry. Big change, yeah. And especially don't forget that the typical customers of the industry are big FMCG groups as well. So they require the same level of professionalism that they have internally from their suppliers, so that you talk on the same eye level, right? This was not the case 20 plus years ago. Now it is. Definitely it is. I think the smaller companies upgraded. I've seen many family-owned companies now managed by family outside members, by professional managers, and via the M&A buy and build strategies of so many, some PE-owned, some public companies. We've seen a significant upgrade here. So this is like the structure of the industry. The new element of the industry is everything around sustainability. Basically, the industry, and it's true for all material fractions. We were like, okay, here's a new product, and the customer says, well, I need it folded like this or with a oxygen barrier. No problem. Back next week. Okay, oxygen barrier applied, folded like this, colored like that, printed like that. So it was like an industry which many things were possible, where customer could like require anything, moisture barrier, UV barrier, colored, backside printed, front side print. So there was no end in properties and creativities. And we delivered as an industry in very short time, and usually with a reasonable amount of cost. So we never, like, packaging for a final product is in a single digit percentage cost wise, and it continued to be despite adding all those properties. Right? It was never like 20% of a chocolate is packaging. Never. It was always a single percentage, sometimes even lower than 1% for some premium products. So, and now there's a paradigm change that you cannot just add things anymore, because then your packaging is no longer recyclable.
Yeah.
And so you need to think, okay, how can I achieve the requirement of the market of that particular customer in barrier properties and aesthetics, whatever, and keep the recyclability, or even in the future, which is now already written in the new regulation but is not implemented yet, recycled content. So how can I respond to my customer's specification and request with a recyclable packaging and one day with recycled content? And this is a big one. This is really a big one.
Everybody's trying to figure that one out. Everyone's trying.
Exactly.
That's
and it's not a walk in the park. It's not a obvious solution. Everybody can just look it up in Wikipedia and apply. Yeah. But it means a lot of development, a lot of try and error, a lot of brain which needs to be put into in order to get there. And I think it is for the good, because definitely, while we created a lot of value, the packaging industry, for so many brand owners, protecting their goods and having longer shelf lifetimes and allowing goods to travel without being deteriorated, information. Think about all the allergies, religious aspects people may have. You buy a product and you can read things easily, whether it applies to your needs or not. So all these elements are super important in packaging. But we completely forgot that there is something after us, which we need to protect and maintain. And I'm happy and glad to see that this is now happening. It should have happened a little bit more gradually already some time ago. Now it's happening like in a brutal bang moment, but I think it's for the good.
Yeah, I mean, the innovation has been the speed of innovation, as I said, over the last few years has just been, and you see these kind of smaller players that before, I think it's easier now to set up businesses, get investment, and as I said, a lot of money is flowing into the industry, and I think again, hopefully, that'll just ultimately serve the industry and ultimately consumers in a much better way to try to solve that problem. So, yeah, really interesting to understand that. And I said, finally, I think kind of looking ahead, you know, in general, we're still sort of facing a bit of uncertainty. You know, there's still a few choppy waters. Obviously, we had you know, a war in continental Europe last year, coming out of what was a pretty global pandemic, and I think things had stabilized, and then, you know, we're started, you know, cost of living inflation. There's still obviously a lot of complex challenges for leaders in any industry to navigate. And again, as somebody that's had the top job, and I mean, you were CEO when COVID hit, you've seen your fair share of crises. So was also curious to understand, you know, what is your advice, you know, for leaders, aspiring leaders that have to deal with that level of complexity, challenges, uncertainty. The world is changing at such a fast pace. I mean, now even with, we see the progress on AI, and it's going to even get even more complex, and even the speed of change is going to be even faster. So again, as somebody who's had that top job, what is your advice to people for the future in terms of helping navigate that change, navigating complexity for the years to come?
Might be three things which come to my mind. One is take your time to reflect. So especially now where people can work wherever
Mhm.
with digital means which are so easy to use. So you're on the beach, you have your Zoom meeting, you're on a mountain hut, you have your Zoom meeting, and you're home, you have your Zoom meeting. And you're never off. And it's super easy for senior leaders to be busy almost 24/7.
Mm.
But my number one advice is take your time in setting back and think and reflect and challenge the status quo. Challenge what you're doing and how you earn money, what makes you successful. By definition, it's not how you will be successful in 2, 3, or 5 years out, by definition.
Mhm.
So you need to take the time now to think what makes you successful in the future and already shape things in that direction. So, and it's difficult. I've been there, and it's super easy to be busy, and then you come home and you should rather spend the time with your wife and family than doing what I just said. But you need to carve out time and think about that. Um, Second advice is be authentic, because especially in crisis, people watch you even more closer than any other time. When you're a leader, especially a CEO, everybody watches every step you do, every word
Mhm.
you say, everything.
Mm.
But in a crisis mode, even more. You're on the radar of everybody, what you say. And people understand. You don't need to be an expert, have a degree, a PhD in psychology. People understand when you're lying, when you're hiding the truth, or hiding something from them. People have a good sense. If you stand in front of a video monitor, in front of a crowd in a town hall meeting, and you are not telling the truth, there's a big amount of people in that crowd who got you and say,
Mm.
this guy is not honest. So be authentic and honest is key, because only then people will trust you. And then maybe the last piece of advice is don't be afraid in admitting you don't know. especially in crisis times, which like the pandemic was one of the brutal ones. We had no idea. I had like calls every other day with the organization and said, here is what I know today.
Mm.
And there were questions and said, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm working on it. I try to find out. I will tell you when I know, but don't be afraid of saying you don't know. It does not make you a smaller or a worse leader if you admit you don't know. Sometimes you have people around you who know better, so let them speak.
Mm.
Fine. It will not hurt you to give them a ticket to the microphone. But because it makes you even a better leader, because then you show that you have experts helping you in taking the right decisions. And I've seen so many leaders being afraid of admitting that they don't know.
Mm.
They rather bullshit around and blah 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 something. Just say you don't know. And the next time you know, you just tell your organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are the free advices.
Yeah. Well, really appreciate that. And I just wanted to also end on a final question, because I took a lot of value from this. And I think when we spoke, and I think I was also wanting to ask again, is you again have had those jobs that demanded a lot from you, and traveling, obviously running, multi-billion euro companies, and you've alluded already to your family and your son, and just advice that also you give to leaders to manage when they have obviously a very large scope as a leader, but at the same time they have to balance that with their own personal and family life. How you found it? What's the advice you give there in particular?
But first of all, I didn't do everything right.
Right.
I made big mistakes myself. So it hasn't been a straight line there. But my advice is similar as in a leadership position: communication, and just be transparent with reality. So there are two things I always did with family, saying, if you need me, you can call me. So you have my cell phone. I will always answer calls. If there's an urgency, wherever I am in the world, I will answer your call. So people, my kids, my wife knew that if there is something they really need me, they reached me. So there's no secretary blocking me or whatever. Family first, in any occasion in life. Yeah. But of course, don't abuse it, because I forgot my whatever charger. No, that's not a phone call I want to receive while I'm in a meeting.
No.
But if it's really important, and especially when the kids are young, they are unable to separate that, to understand, oh, dad is still on the phone, I gotta be silent. And now daddy said he has time. If the kids see you, it means you're there for them.
Yeah.
And you really need to be there for them, especially when they're young. And they don't distinguish whether you are still on a phone, or you're there. You were gone for a week traveling. Now you walk through the front door in your house, and kids are happy to see you, and you have to dedicate that time to the kids. You cannot just keep working. That's super important. Kids need to know when you're there, you have time for them and you have full dedication for them. When you are in a meeting, close the door and hide from them, because they cannot separate or mix the two. So, and I think it's finding the right balance there, which sometimes I was better and sometimes I did not. But everybody needs to find the right balance there, and especially when you have small kids, you tend to forget that you still have a wife, which needs attention, and also that it's not easy. And I'm not sure I can give the best advice. I can just tell you That especially the kid element for me was always very important to be there for them if they needed me, and it's still the case until today, and kind of worked well.
Yeah. No, as I said, I kind of really appreciated that advice, and I think in particular, there's a lot of people that probably, I mean, maybe with work from home, with people having a bit more flexibility, but nonetheless, I think again, there's a lot of challenges out there, and having to balance both. We talk a lot about balance in all facets of life now. So having that advice from somebody that's been there at all levels is really invaluable. So, Alexander, I really appreciate the insights from a professional and a personal basis as well. Appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us here.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me here, and all the best with your podcast, and talk soon.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.